But during that time, I actually ended up herniating a disc in my back, and I ended up getting hooked on painkillers.
Oh, man.
And I was one of those statistics. Back in mid-2000s, remember, it's like, oh, I got hurt, and the doctor's like, hey, here, take 4 to 6 a day as needed for pain. And it wasn't like one of those little orange bottles. It was like the big one, right? And I realized that it helped me manage the physical pain, but it also helped me manage the emotional pain. And that's when it went from Vicodin to Percocet to OxyContin. And 2 years in, I lost everything, and I was living out of my car. And sure enough, I ended up hopping from couch to couch for a while, and woke up on a friend's couch in California one morning with this epiphany that I got myself into this mess, and I'm going to have to get myself out of it.
Closer. This is your time. Hit record on. Your crooked life. What's your story? Hey, say the words out loud. Mike and Scott gonna crack that crowd. What's your story? Hey, turn it up, let's go. Every voice, every scar, every road. What's your story? Mike and Scott. Let's talk.
Oh boy, Mike Lindstrom, Scott Leese, what's your story? Another episode. I'm pretty excited about this one. We get to get coached a little bit on this next one.
I need some coaching.
Yeah, we need some coaching, especially when it comes to that pillar of our life called health and fitness.
Yeah.
So Chris Powell, I've known this guy from afar for 15 years. I actually met him in a studio. Scott Passmore, mutual friend, he could talk about that in a minute, had him on talking about something about fitness. They had a little gym, by the way. I think it's still there in that studio. He's in there doing like burpees and push-ups and Scott and all these stuff. And I'm out there promoting my book with Dan Lear. And I got to meet him and say hi, but just like you became social media friends. But since we started the podcast 6 months ago, every single person I've talked to, you got to get Chris on. You got to get Chris on. You got to get Chris on. So, man, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
So
it's a pleasure.
yeah, we start every podcast with a simple question, man. What's your story? Take us where you want us to take us.
How much time we got? Okay, I'll give you the abbreviated version real quick. Born here in Arizona, quickly moved to Idaho, California, Pacific Northwest. So grew up in that region, but then came back to go to Arizona State University. Had a wild ride along the way. Wild and ASU go in the same sense too often. And then quickly found myself on national television helping individuals transform their lives while I was initially heading down a very different path. And so I found myself in physical fitness. And actually, initially, I found myself on the local news here as the morning fitness guy. Then I got swept up into Hollywood and helped people transform their lives around the world. And it brings me here to the couch hanging out with you guys.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. What was the first big break when you got that phone call? Go, hey, we want you to be on this particular show, whether it's national or otherwise, where you looked at milestone in your mind and say, this was the one that put me to the next level.
Oh, gosh. There's a big story that leads up to that break. I would say my first break, though, was when I walked into KTVK, News Channel 3, in 2002. I was modeling clothes there for a buddy of mine. And all I needed to do was get through the doors. And as soon as I got through the doors, I actually had segment ideas planned out.
Wow.
And I said, hey, while I'm here, I was like, who's a producer I can talk to? I just had to get past security. Pointed me to this one woman's desk, and I walked over there and said, hi, my name's Chris Powell. I'm here doing a segment for Hugo Boss, but I just got a degree in exercise science from ASU, and I've got some ideas. I've been watching the show for years. I got some ideas. I just wanted to go ahead and throw them out there and see if you give me a shot. And she looked at me, she went, no one's ever just asked me for a segment. I don't know, you want to come back in 2 weeks? And I was like, I'll be here.
That fast.
That's amazing.
If you ask,
Yep.
as the saying goes,
Yeah, sure.
Closed mouths don't get fed.
yeah, ask and you shall receive. I just asked. And so I can't tell you how many times I tried to talk myself out of it. And then I just walked in there with the pieces of paper and I just asked for it. And sure enough, I got the gig. And one segment turned into 2, turned into 10, turned into 20. And before I know it, I started getting emails from individuals around the valley because I'm doing these health and fitness segments. And so more and more questions coming in about weight loss. But what was really interesting about the emails that I was getting was a lot of people that were saying, I'm 300 pounds, I'm 400 pounds, I'm 500 pounds. I don't go out at night, and talking about just all the suffering that they had been going through. And I was thinking, like, I'm here in Arizona. I'm out all the time. Where are they? And one of them even said, I pride myself on being invisible because I shop at Walmart at midnight because I'm so tired of people pointing fingers and laughing at me. And it really started to pull at me because I was in health and fitness, a degree in exercise science, right? Yeah. So I was all about performance and everything like that. And as I started to read more and more of these emails that were coming into me, and emails, this is early 2000s, but they really started pouring in, and I just couldn't stop thinking about them. And there was one in particular, and it was a gentleman who was 630 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And he was 1 year older than me. I was 24 now at this time, and he was 25. And he said, the doctor just left my house. I haven't left my house in 2 years. The doctor just left, and he said, I'm not going to see 30. This is not the life I imagined for myself. I always wanted to get married. I want to have kids. He's like, I don't know how to ask this, but I'm asking you for help. And I could not stop thinking about it. And he lived about 10 minutes from where I was living at the time. And for about 2 weeks, I was thinking about it. And I just thought, he left his address, and I got in my car and I drove to his house. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I just had to, it was something that was pulling at my heart. And sure enough, I knew he was going to be there. He hadn't left in 2 years. So I introduced myself, walked in the house. He was surprised. And we sat down, we talked. 10 minutes in, we were laughing. We're talking about South Park. We're telling jokes. And I'm like, bro, like we became instant friends. And I said, dude, I don't know where this is going to go, but I'll be back on Tuesday. And I showed up every other day for 2 years, and he ended up losing 400 pounds.
Wow.
Became my best friend. And it was just the most incredible ride. In fact, as he was losing the weight, he said he wanted to share his story. So I would bring him on News Channel 3 with me, and Scott would interview him, and his name was David. And he became a local star, and we would be out walking, and people would be honking their horns, and he was just a local hero. Guy lost 400 pounds.
I can't imagine.
So it was an incredible journey. And what's interesting, though, is during that time, and we'll get to the whole TV show far, but that was where things really started taking off. But during that time, I actually ended up herniating a disc in my back, and I ended up getting hooked on painkillers.
Oh, man.
And I was one of those statistics. And back in mid-2000s, remember, it's like, oh, I got hurt, and the doctor's like, hey, take 4 to 6 a day as needed for pain. And it wasn't like one of those little orange bottles. It was like the big one, right? And I realized that it helped me manage the physical pain, but it also helped me manage the emotional pain. And that's when it went from Vicodin to Percocet to OxyContin. And 2 years in, I lost everything, and I was living out of my car. And David had already lost his weight, and we'd become such good friends, and he saw me going downhill, and he transformed his life.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I ended up hopping from couch to couch for a while, and woke up on a friend's couch in California one morning with this epiphany. And just after losing everything and just being hooked on painkillers for a couple of years, just a big epiphany of the fact that I got myself into this mess and I'm going to have to get myself out of it. And I was so busy pointing the finger at the time, and it was everyone else's fault. And so I ended up getting in my car, drove back to Phoenix, and on the way I stopped at a tattoo parlor, and I got the Roman numerals 1 through 1,000,000 tattooed down my side. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I have to live for something bigger than myself, because in that epiphany, I just realized how selfish I was being. And again, I was playing the victim. I was so busy pointing the finger. And so I said, I'm going to own this. And now I think the only way for me to get myself out of this is to live for something bigger than me. And now I can't get out of it. So it's the Roman numerals 1 through 1,000,000. I said, I'm going to check them off as I can make a positive difference in people's lives. And that was my mission. And I was talking to David at the time, going back and forth. He said, hey, I was talking to my dad. You can come live on our couch. You just stay with us. So David, the guy who everyone saw how I changed his life, what people don't realize, he opened up his doors to me. They let me sleep on their couch for 6 months while I got back on my feet. And when I did, and I could finally afford rent for myself, David moved out with me, and we lived together for 2 years. After that, I'm sober. I've been sober ever since.
That's awesome.
And it's just been the wildest ride. And what happened is that, sorry, this is a long, you said, what's my story? Here's my story.
This is great.
In this time, David, we actually got him like 5 different skin surgeries, had his eyes done, got the teeth done. I mean, from all the best doctors in town, right? Jay Schwartz for the eyes, and Bottolato did the teeth. Mazahari did all of his skin. And I'm so like, the guy, and he looks like a model at this time. Like David looks like a freaking model. And so now everyone's on a quest, me and all these doctors, to get him dating, because he's never been on a date before. So we're having so much fun. And he posted his befores and afters on, you're probably not going to know this, you guys are so young, but it's a site called MySpace.
Yeah.
You don't remember MySpace.
I was on MySpace. I was on MySpace, man.
So he posted his befores and afters on MySpace, and it went viral. And before you know it, David and I were on Oprah, and 2020. And it was just like, it was crazy. We flew out to Tokyo and did a Japanese game show. And they were just fascinated with his weight loss and this friendship that we had. And it was during that time, there was a show, was getting really big on NBC called The Biggest Loser.
I remember it very well. I watched that show.
And I had a friend in Hollywood who calls me up and she said, dude, I just saw everything you're doing with David. That was incredible. I saw you guys on the Today Show. She said, hey, my CEO wants to talk to you because everyone's interested in these weight loss shows. So I ended up talking to this guy from a production company in LA. He said, come out to LA. Let's just show us how you do what you do.
Yep.
Create a show and we'll do our best. We could go out and try to sell it. And so after 3 trips to LA over the couple months, we ended up creating the concept for a show. And it was totally different from Biggest Loser, but it was in the weight loss space. It was like to tell the deep story, like the emotional journey of transformation. And didn't hear anything from the production company. I'm just radio silence for 3 months. I get a random phone call out of the blue. It's the CEO. He goes, hey, dude, what's up? Well, what's up? Nothing much.
You tell me.
How are you? It's been a while. He goes, yeah. So we've been busy selling your show. He's a storyteller, so he's really good at this stuff. He goes, we've been busy selling your show. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. I'm honored to have been a part of his team to create a show. The host was going to be a celebrity fitness trainer, right? And so just to have been a part of that, it was an honor. And he goes, yeah, it was a bidding war between A&E and Bravo, and we ended up selling it. Guess who? I said, no clue. I don't even know how this stuff works. He goes, ABC. I went, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Go team. He goes, you're not getting this.
Yeah, you're not getting it.
I was
You're
like,
not getting it.
what do I need to get? I stopped and went, wait, who's the host? He goes, you are. And David's right there. I go, and I said, wait, what does this mean? He goes, it means pack your bags. You're leaving in 5 weeks. I went, oh my gosh. Hung up the phone, packed my bags. I went, David, get ready. And sure enough, ran out to Hollywood and 5 years, 76 transformations.
Wow.
And it was a really wild ride.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how the whole thing happened. That's how the whole show started.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you talk about getting that phone call. We have Mark Kerr on here was talking about when he got the call back finally from The Rock, when he said, hey, we're going to do this movie. And he said, man, I've been waiting years for this call. So it's just funny how patience, passionate persistence, I call it, right? That passionate persistence paid off. So David, you guys are still like buds. You guys are, didn't you post something on social media recently with him? I saw a picture.
Well,
was that?
David passed
last
year.
That's what I saw then. That's why I wanted to ask you that question. Something that I did see that hit me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he ended up, even when the show started to happen, he was actually supposed to be my coach on the show. So I had to convince the network and the production company to bring him on as a coach. And when I ended up leaving, he became a trainer. He got certified to be a trainer, started dating the front desk girl, which is the sweetest. She was the sweetest thing ever. And things were good. And he started falling back into his old habits.
Oh, man.
Even though he and I had actually lived together for 2 years at the time, but we had been on this journey for 6-7 years together.
Yeah.
And he kept the weight off. And he started falling back into those old habits. And as he was gaining, he ended up, even in communications with the production company, everything, slowly backing out of the whole opportunity. But that emotionally was devastating for him. And so he ended up going through a roller coaster. He gained a lot of the weight back, and then he turned around and lost the weight again.
Wow.
And he ended up getting married to another girl, and he actually became a father, a stepfather of some children. But then she left him, and he gained the weight back again. And so his body just having gone through so
lot of
much,
stress.
because it
a lot.
wasn't gaining and losing 50 pounds.
Yeah.
It was gaining and losing 300 to 400 pounds
That's amazing.
a couple times. And his body just didn't have it in it anymore, and he ended up passing away last year.
It was recent. It was this last year. Yeah, okay.
Last year.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the biggest thing that you think people just don't understand when it comes to health, fitness, eating, dieting? Like, what are people missing? I mean, now you got drugs. You can take the shot. You get microdosing. Everyone's always looking for the quick fix. I read a stat recently in the last however many decades it's been that they've had the New York Times bestseller. It's always been a diet, fitness, or some best-selling book in the top 20 every single week.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, it's real simple. You burn more than you take in. It's called a deficit. Like, it's simple.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
It's not. So what's the misconception? Because you're coaching people not just about the physical part of it. It's this. It's 80-20, right?
Everything starts here.
Yeah.
Everything starts here. And I didn't understand that. Even when I first started working with David, coming fresh out of school, obviously it was nutrition and movement, and we're going to carb cycle you, and we're going to focus on, I was using all these different techniques as far as the training goes and the nutrition. Yes, he implemented that, but he implemented that because he felt friendship. and connection and compassion. That part was missing. And so there wasn't a void that he was turning to food for anymore, because we were buddies and we had that connection. And so it fulfilled a part of himself that he felt was missing. Every transformation I've done, yes, we use nutrition and exercise and sleep to accelerate the results and to change the human body physically. But if this isn't in the right place, and if their heart isn't fulfilled, I wouldn't say fulfilled, if they don't have a thorough understanding of who they are and why they do the things that they do, you cannot control, because from the neck down, the body operates on principles that have been established over the hundreds of thousands of years. And however, the moment you throw the humanity of it in there, it changes the whole thing. And so I think, here's the thing though, the fundamental principles still apply, right? And so even with GLP-1s and these amazing peptides, which again, I'm not against them. Of course, in the fitness industry, I was incredibly threatened at first, and I was like trying to poke holes in them. The research is incredible. The literature continues to get better for a lot of people. They're not for some, but for a lot of people, and especially for the folks I've worked with for decades, it is finally an opportunity for them to be able to focus on the fundamentals without the hunger and the food noise. It will quiet it, because they're battling this over here. And in the meantime, they have to focus on eating right and sleeping and doing all these different things. Now we can finally quiet that battle down so they can put all their energy into one thing and into establishing the foundation. Because once the foundation is set, now we can titrate up and down under medical supervision, of course. But then if they do decide to come off these weight loss drugs, where they've lost the weight, time to come off, they can titrate down off of it, and they've established months of proper habits to do it the right way. Going back to what is it that ultimately changes? Hope. Hope changes. That's belief that you can actually do it. I spent, again, decades working with people that had given up hope. And they had tried and failed so many times that they reached a point where they just gave up. And so it wasn't on me, but I was blessed with the opportunity to show a lot of individuals who came from a really dark place where they had lost hope how to believe in themselves again. And I did that by breaking down all of the massive commitments that they kept thinking they had to make in order to get where they wanted to go. And we break it down to just keeping one promise to yourself. And that's what really builds the momentum. You break it all down to what we call a power promise. And if you can keep that promise every single day, then you can start to stack them. You start to build that momentum and that belief in yourself. And you think, if I could do that, what else can I? And then we stack it and we stack it and we take our time. We don't try to do this in 90 days. We take years to do this. And that's how you can see any ordinary individual become extraordinary, by shrinking it all down to something that's so doable every day. Yeah. And that's how I've always done what I've done.
Yeah. So you probably, because you don't know this about Scott. Scott had that battle with scripted pills and such, overcoming that.
Well, we were talking a little bit before the show about some of my health issues and stuff. I left that part out. Not just because we ran out of time or whatever, but you started talking about that, and I'm like, I know exactly what that's like.
I was in its grips for a couple of years, and a lot of my closest friends went upside down.
Yeah. But that hope thing is such an important thing, and we always talk about. Everyone knows, you got to have a purpose, you got to have a why, something at stake. You know, to me, they're all in the same kind of breath. If you have a sense of hope, whether it's family, kids, your future, a vision of something that you want. Yeah. It's hard to really get this right if you don't have that sense of that hope.
Yeah.
I know you're really big on social media. You spent time the early part of your career with traditional media, but now you're really big on social media. Did you attack your social media game the same way that you were just talking about, this small goals, one commitment, stack these things on top of each other? Because social media is hard to crack. It's noisy as hell.
It certainly is. And it's been a really interesting journey for me coming from traditional media, because what happened is that even when MySpace came out, right, and then Facebook and then Instagram, because I had a presence on traditional media, my social media initially started to grow without putting much into it. And for the longest time, I was way more focused on traditional media, because that's where you were seen. This is where I could actually get a message across, with traditional media.
Especially if your social is growing on autopilot a little bit.
Yes.
You trick yourself into thinking, I'm doing pretty good on social media.
That's exactly it, without putting a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
And then when the show ran its course and the contract was up in 2015, and all of a sudden there's no more traditional media, it was like, oh. And at that time, more and more eyeballs were moving from traditional now over to social media. And that was becoming essentially that's where you were able to get a message across. That was the platform. And so it was transitioning, jumping over and learning all new tactics and all completely different strategy. And it's taken years. And I still haven't cracked the code, the algorithm.
Right.
And some things work and something, but it's changing all the time. And rewind 10 years ago, I would do a post and it had 30,000 likes. And now I get a post and I'm happy if it's got 300, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. Even though I might have twice the following, it's just everything's different and it continues to change. And so I think that's the only truth is that you're never going to figure it out. Just stay flexible in it and keep working toward
consistent,
it.
right?
That's it.
Did you learn from that in terms of I need to have more of a multi-channel approach?
Yes.
Like you only did traditional media at first, contract runs out. Oh shit, that vehicle is dead, right? Now I'm in social. So now I'm sure you've got referrals and word of mouth and social. As you try to grow your business and get the word out there, you've got to focus on all these different kind of paths, right?
1,000%. That was actually, I'm glad you brought that up because that was probably one of the biggest eye-opening experiences. Whereas before I could show up on a network show and do my thing and I'd have a ton of eyeballs and it would drive up a bunch of traffic wherever we wanted them to go. And now it was like, okay, now I'm in control of this channel, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because before also, let me tell you, when you're in traditional media, the platform, the network, they call all the shots.
Yeah.
Whereas all of a sudden now, gosh, I've got a few 100,000 followers at this point and it's growing, or maybe got a million, and they're here for me and they're always watching me. And so now it was exciting and scary at the same time because it was like quick. You have to figure out the systems in order to actually create and start generating content on a regular basis because there's a business. That's a full operation behind creating content and putting it out on social. And then, now it's not just Facebook anymore. Now it's Instagram. Now it's Snapchat. Now it's TikTok. Now it's YouTube. Now it's X. And it's okay. Now how can we obviously branch out into creating content once and then pushing it across these different platforms? Again, there's some frustration in that because it's like, oh, gosh, I wish I could just talk to one audience.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know if you guys probably remember it, but when Facebook went down for 2 days, it was like,
freak out.
Oh, wow. Hold on. Now I'm glad these other ones are still going.
Right.
So it's diversify. And if you can start building on multiple platforms, now we're talking. And it's also a whole new level of safety for you. So it's all of our systems are not just focused on one platform. They're focused on a channel, like basically creating content and then diversifying that content across multiple platforms.
With the content that you produce, is it like channel specific or do you produce content and then funnel it out to all the different channels?
Produce content and then funnel it to the different channels, but based on what is the best practices for that channel. So for example, obviously a caption on X needs to be really short, punchy, to the point. On Instagram, I have my most engaged following on Instagram and Facebook. So Facebook, a little bit of an older audience, definitely more storytelling. And I can really connect with my audience that way. With Instagram, same thing, a little bit more storytelling, a little bit younger, but at the same time, just slight nuances for each. But the content itself is the content. Say we're going to talk about the benefits of walking. Then what we'll do is we'll create all the content and then we'll create snippets based on the platform and captions based on the platform.
Yeah. 'Cause one thing that I've noticed with my own business and my content is I'll create a piece of content and then distribute it to different channels, optimized for each channel.
Yep.
Totally different types of clientele come from each particular channel. LinkedIn will bring me consulting. Instagram will bring me coaching and that type of thing. Do you have the same kind of situation with your business? Okay, Facebook, older clients, all these people want big transformation experiences. People from Instagram want something different.
A little bit. I do wonder if because of my already established brand in the weight loss space, there is a lot of that the underlying, I'd say my audience is majority women, about 80%, and many of them looking for weight loss. Not significant weight loss like they saw on my show, some individuals, but most of them just looking to lose 20 to 60 pounds. And that seems to be almost consistent across all, except LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Where LinkedIn is, would you like to do a speaking engagement?
Yeah.
Or a corporate wellness retreat kind of thing. But the other platforms, they actually all tend to be a little bit a similar vibe. TikTok, definitely younger.
Are you on TikTok a lot?
Not as much as I probably should be.
Yeah.
So
that's always the one that's kind of, I was late to the game on TikTok. I know a lot of my friends have been on it forever, and I just jumped on it last year.
Yeah.
But I'm not real super active with it.
I'm not, I need to be more active. And I'm really working on engaging in TikTok a lot more. But learning the platforms, that's a full-time job unto itself.
Yeah.
Oh my
The old
gosh.
algorithm thing. We laugh about that all the time.
Oh man.
How do you handle haters when you get social media? Because you're putting yourself out there, man. You're going to get haters.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
It used to really hurt.
Really?
It used to really bother me. Yeah, because
You'd read it and go, oh, wow.
I am a people pleaser, and it's something I've really been working on. I've been aware of that for years, and it's something that, again, you got to name it to tame it, right? And so I was aware that I've been a people pleaser for a long time, and it's put me in some tough situations, especially though it hurts when people don't like me because I've spent my life trying to be likable, trying to get people to like me.
What do they not like? I mean, you're a likable guy. I watch your stuff, and what are people saying? I can't imagine.
You know, well, it's
Here's the thing.
Well, people hate what they don't feel like they can be or become. I've never met you before. I'll figure out what I can hate about Chris right now.
Yeah.
fair enough.
He's energetic. He's positive. He's fit.
Yep.
He's making a difference in people's lives. And if I was of a certain type of personality and I'm not fit, I'm not making a difference, I'm not energetic, et cetera, I'm not positive, I can project and be like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay. Good point. There you go. So you just got your answer. By the way, thank you for the compliments.
There's certain people who think and behave that way. I mean, I get negative stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I have to flip it around and be like, okay, who are they? What are they dealing with? Doing it? But it doesn't mean it's easy.
Clown face.
Yeah.
Clown face.
See, Mike,
I love it.
I sit there and I'll take it. And then there's moments where I'm like, I got to punch back.
Yeah.
And I'll do a little clown emoji, like, hey, you're a clown or whatever, right? Mike's like, what are you doing, dude? I'm human, man. I'm human.
I've written them and deleted more than you can count. For
You ever done that one?
No.
Rip it up. It's good.
I just never hit enter.
The best part is like he did like this one guy. It was last month or whatever it was. I don't even know what the hell. Who's he ripping on? Billy
don't know.
Cundiff.
I
Billy
can't remember.
Cundiff.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
the nicest guy on the planet. Former kicker for the Cowboys. You can go on this guy's Instagram. You can see he's like an Eagles fan. So look at there you go. No wonder he hates the Cowboy guy. Whatever. And all he does is keep talking, and he just goes clown face.
Oh my
Keeps talking,
gosh.
Clown face. Clown face. He got 3 clown faces in a row, and then finally just delete them.
It's hard not to let it get to you. I end up getting a lot of it though, especially with, and nothing against it, but the body positivity movement, especially when we went from the weight loss shows into body positivity, where it was just a lot of people, they came after me because I was on my show. I weighed my participants on truck scales, you know, and I was the host of that show and the head coach of taking people through the weight loss journey. And some individuals, even though we really tried our best to be sensitive to honoring what the journey was like and ultimately make the individual the hero of the story. And if you watch the show, that was the premise of the show, was someone coming from the darkest of dark places to becoming an absolute hero. And they did that. But still, a lot of people wrapped me up in the world of that.
How do you overcome that? Because my son is 15. He just brought this up the other day. He says, Dad, I know what you do, coaching and this, that, and the other, but if we know this person is overweight, and what this movement is saying is that's okay. We should accept them for who they are. But his question was, authentically, there's other things that happen when you're overweight. You have higher blood pressure. You're not healthy inside.
Oh, yeah.
But there's got to be a line where someone like you as the coach goes, guys, hold on. That's a limiting belief.
Absolutely.
That's BS right there. You're telling yourself a story to make yourself feel better about your identity, and I'm here to break that identity. So how do you handle that?
Here's the thing, and this has always been my approach. I have never forced fitness or wellness upon anyone. I only help people who come to me and ask for help if they've had that realization. If they're sitting there saying, I love my body the way it is, I love being 400 pounds, whether they're being, the thing is, a lot of times I can feel the pain and the suffering that they might be, you know, and they're creating a mask, but that's not on me. That's out of my scope of practice. That's a psychologist's job.
Right.
But I am here and I only appear as the coach when they say, I want more. I want more for myself. I can say, I can help you believe in yourself. I know the path. I can take you there. I see you. I see you for who you are, and I can get you to where you want to go. Let's go. But if they're so busy saying, I love me, this is who I am, great. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
And you get to choose. The only time I have a problem with it is like, I love me, and this is okay. And by the way, everyone else out there, this is the way I eat, this is what I do, and this is the way it should be. If you try to project that onto other people, like, well, hold on now. This is unhealthy. Right now, because you have obesity, you have higher risk of blood sugar, heart attacks, stroke, diabetes, and multiple forms of cancer. I mean, you could just list off all the things that come with obesity, right? It's the second leading cause of preventable death. So it's one of those interesting situations. So I only appear for those who
Yeah.
Yeah, because my job as a coach is to do just that. So I don't try to force it on anyone. That's not my job to make that change. So it's up to the individual.
Who are some of the other coaches that you were working with on that show?
Oh, as far as other coaches, there's just one, my ex-wife. So, that was it.
That's it.
Oh, but our team, we
Yeah.
had psychologists, we had doctors, we
That
had.
were not necessarily on the show. They were behind the scenes.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we had a full-blown medical
Yeah.
team, and they were incredible. And so what would happen a lot of times is people are going through the journey of transformation, things would come up. Every 50 pounds lost is like another layer of protection that you're stripping away. And a lot of times trauma from the past would come up. And in those situations, then it's my job, not even as a coach anymore. I'm here to support you as a friend. And I'm going to go ahead and bring you to Rachel Grodner, who is the lead psychologist, who can now give you the tools that you need to work with you through this. And a lot of times we would actually bring them into a full team of other licensed professionals that could help that individual through that trauma.
Yeah.
Then I could work with them as we would just help them continue on their journey. And there were some incredibly beautiful moments of people overcoming a lot of pain and suffering that they've hung on to for years that I was able to witness firsthand. It was really beautiful, though.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Before we wrap up, we always have you promote. You got anything coming up? Any events?
Oh,
anything?
my gosh.
How do we find you? Social media?
Okay, social media, Real Chris Powell across all channels, just Real Chris Powell. And so I've actually recently, in the last few months, I took a job as the chief transformation officer of a company called Thrive Lab, which is cool. They're medical providers. It's a nationwide network of them. And it's wonderful having that kind of medical support, whether it's hormone replacement therapy. They offer peptides, the GLP-1s and everything. But it was really cool because the founder, he said, I don't want to be just like a typical drug mill out there. We're offering this medical support. Come in and help us build the programs underneath it with nutrition, training, stress management, sleep hygiene, so we can really support people the right way.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool thing that we got going on. And so we've been working with Thrive Lab for quite some time, and a couple big launches coming up here pretty soon in just the next couple of weeks.
So nothing you can speak to yet?
Not yet, but stay tuned.
So we got to get you back on, man.
Yes.
I can see why, and Passmore told me this. He goes, I can see why you're like a resident guest of these shows because you're very good at what you do, man.
Well,
you have
thank you.
great energy, and that's what people want. When they come to you, they want certainty. They want happiness. That's the feeling. It's rapport.
They want hope. They want hope.
They want hope, and you're
He's
giving
a
it.
dealer in hope.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I like that. You got to name it to tame it.
Name it to tame it.
Name it
It's
to
one of
tame
the most
it.
powerful things we can do as
Yeah,
humans.
that's absolute. Hey, man, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a super busy guy, kept coming on our little tiny podcast compared to a national show, but we really appreciate that. So, signing off, Mike Lindstrom, my man, Scott Leese. What's your story? Hey, everyone, Mike Lindstrom here. Thanks for tuning in to What's Your Story with Mike and Scott. Make sure to hit the subscribe button for new episodes every Tuesday morning and check out a few of our previous episodes below. We'll see you next time.